Have you ever had a plant-based bacon that was so good you felt like you were eating the real thing? Neither have I. Now, I've made a lot of vegan bacon. I can't even tell you how many, and some of them have been really good. The Daikon Bacon is one of my all-time favorite creations. It really is. I've always felt like it could be better, and that's why I kept going with the bacon series. Now, the very last bacon video I made was a tofu bacon, and there was a technique that I used where I layered dry vital wheat gluten to create dense layers of seitan, of gluten, and that created a very meaty texture and feel. But the inside, the tofu, the fat part, it tasted good, and it was dense, and it worked perfect for bacon, but it wasn't 100%. And that led me to this. I'm combining 3 different techniques from 3 different videos to create the perfect bacon, starting with a ball of dough.
Okay, so the first thing that we need to do to make our ball of dough, which is gonna be the main part of this meat, is we're gonna be using just regular all-purpose flour. I actually like to use a higher protein flour, and that's gonna be something like a bread flour, but I actually don't have that much. I thought I had more bread flour than what I did. So I'm gonna be using actually a mix between bread flour and all-purpose flour. My point here is just use whatever flour you got. It's gonna work. So I'm gonna start with 5 cups of flour, and we're gonna use 2 cups of water. Now I'm just gonna, this is my weird way of mixing this together, but we're just gonna slowly drizzle in the water while I mix it with just like a long chopstick or like a fork. So once all the flour is hydrated and flaky, you can then just dump that out onto your work surface, and we're just gonna quickly knead this together. Now remember my video with don't knead your dough, you don't need the knead. So we're just gonna just kind of put this together and then throw it back in the bowl, let it sit and let it rest for about an hour. And it's rested. So this is the autolyze method. Now we have a dough ball that is perfectly formed with gluten. You can see how stretchy it is, and you can even get like the little window pane test where you get the stretch gluten real thin and you get like a real thin sheet of gluten. So this is perfect. It's exactly what we were looking for. So at this point, I do want to knead it just a little bit. Maybe like a minute, nothing really crazy. Once the dough ball looks good and it's fairly elastic, we're gonna drop it back in the bowl and take it over to the sink to start washing it. The washing is gonna remove the starches and fibers and essentially leave us with just pure gluten. Now, yes, you can use the gluten flour or vital wheat gluten to completely make this. It's gonna work really well. But the reason why I wanted to use the washed flour seitan method, washed flour is gonna give us a lot more texture. And for something like this that we're gonna be cutting thin, I think that's going to be key. I think that's going to be a really key element. And also having like those starchy pockets, starch is going to play an important role here. So the reason why I'm washing in this bowl is because we're going to be saving all of that white liquid. That's wheat milk. No, I'm kidding. That's wheat starch. It's pure wheat starch. Now, once your wheat milk gets to be where it's like that pure white, that's when you need to go for a second wash. So I just emptied it out and I turned the water back on. We're filling up the bowl and we're gonna wash it for the second time. Now, this second wash, the water is gonna probably get just as white, or maybe just slightly less. You'll be able to start telling when like the gluten starts separating a lot more and it's getting a lot more stringy, and it doesn't seem to be washing more. Go ahead and empty it again and go for the third wash. By the third wash, you should start having clearer water. Now, this could be the end. You might have to do maybe 4 or even 5 washes. The gluten's really stringy at this point, and this is actually gonna be like part gluten and part starch. This is not fully washed yet, but I'm gonna save some of this gluten how it is, because that's gonna be used for the fat part of the bacon, and it's gonna be like a little bit more tender than the meaty side. And that's actually why I ran it through just a strainer, because I wanna really wash out that final bit. So for this next step, we're gonna need a food processor or a blender. I'm just gonna be using my food processor. I think that's gonna work great. Now I'm gonna leave my little screenshot ingredients list near the end, but we're gonna start on the fat side, and we're just gonna be using some mushroom seasoning, a little nutritional yeast, olive oil, and a pinch of salt. And then we just wanna kind of just pulse that together. Now this is gonna come out really stretchy, really gooey, really kind of gummy. This is gonna be super soft. So have a container set to the side so that way you can just drop this right in and move on to the meat side. Now for the meat side, this is like a much drier dough. So we're gonna kind of like pull it apart, and we're gonna be adding some nutritional yeast, beetroot powder, cocoa powder. The beetroot and cocoa powder are mostly for color, but they also add a hint of like that earthiness that really rounds out the flavor of meat, along with some mushroom seasoning, a dash of garlic powder, and onion powder. Now we wanna make it fairly smoky, so we're gonna be using some smoked paprika and then soy sauce, along with some liquid smoke and a little bit of maple syrup. That's gonna give it that maple smoked kind of flavor. Just pulse that together, and this one's gonna come out a little bit more firm, but it's still gonna be pretty sticky. Now, this one's looking awesome. So we're just gonna set this aside, and now let's start layering up our bacon. Now, just like I learned with the tofu, that the gluten flour layered between like 2 things kind of creates like a really dense layer of seitan. So I'm gonna start off with a teaspoon of that gluten flour across the bottom. Then I'm gonna start with the fat mixture, which we're just gonna spread across the bottom, and then another layer of the gluten flour. So I'm gonna keep these layers thin, and we're just gonna alternate between the gluten flour, fat, and the meat layers. And we're gonna keep alternating with very thin layers until we're out of all of the seitan. So that starch that we set aside, that's gonna be the fat. But we need the starch to settle to the bottom, and that's gonna take overnight. So I'm gonna throw a lid on the seitan, throw it in the fridge, and we're gonna let the starch settle overnight.
Hey gang, I gotta tell you about this one, because my name just changed. You can now call me Lord Saucestache because of today's sponsor. Established Titles is based on an historic Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as laird, lord, or lady. And Established Titles allows you to buy as little as 1 square foot of land so you can call yourself lord or lady. That dedicated land that you're buying is on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland. And you get an official certificate with a crest. Your certificate will feature a unique plot number with which you can see the exact location of your land. And my favorite part is Established Titles plants a tree with every order. They work with one tree planted and trees for the future to support global reforestation efforts. And they even have couple packs that come with adjoining plots of land. I love that. I wish Monica and I would have got that one. And Established Titles told me that the first 200 of you that buy a title pack will get their plot of land right next to mine, within a 2-minute walking distance. So depending on how many of you are becoming lords or ladies, we could end up making our own little Saucestache kingdom. So gang, Established Titles is running a massive sale right now. Plus, if you click the link in the description below and use code Saucestache, you're gonna get an additional 10% off. So head over to establishedtitles.com/Saucestache and pick up your gifts now. Whoever you're buying for is going to love these, or just get it for yourself, because I mean, why not? Established Titles, thanks for making me a lord in my kingdom. Lord Saucestache, here we are.
Okay, we're back. So now you can see how much of that starch has settled. It's quite a bit, very drastic. I already poured off a little bit of water, but now we just have to pour off the rest of that water. Once that's poured off, we're left with pure starch. Now we're just gonna take our seitan, the bacon that's been in the fridge overnight. I'm gonna separate the sides because I want the starch to pour over the sides just to make sure that it fills any crevices in where it needs to be filled in. And we're just gonna use all of this starch, which is about, I would say about 1.5 cups or so. Now I'm gonna steam this in a large Dutch oven that has like a steaming tray or like a roasting tray, and we're just gonna steam this over kind of like a low heat. We just need a low constant steam, and we're gonna let this steam for about 3 or 4 hours. Now remember, it's steaming on low. I mean, you could even do this probably in just like a crock pot with, put something on the bottom for it to stand. We just need it to be in that, fairly even temperature controlled environment. So at the 3 hour mark, start testing it. The top needs to be firm, but it is gonna be sticky. It's gonna be really sticky, but you're not gonna be able to it's not gonna be jello. Pull it out, let it set for aside for just a few minutes to cool down. And then I'm just gonna run a knife around the edge just to kind of separate the seam. I'm gonna top it with parchment paper and then flip it over and just let it sit like that. After a few moments, it's gonna start to settle and it's gonna pull itself out. So now we're gonna put another piece of parchment paper in the bowl and we're gonna flip the bacon back into the parchment paper and we're gonna throw this in the freezer and allow it to get firm. Now I know this is a ton of steps, but trust me on this one, it comes out. It's just wow. So once it's frozen, we're pulling it out of the freezer, and you know what? I think it's gonna be pretty awesome. The edges are at like an angle, so instead of cutting the entire time at an angle, I'm gonna kind of try to slice down just to cut off that rough edge. And honestly, I was expecting this to come out pretty good, but I'm gonna say that once this came off, I was blown away. I mean, just look at that. Look at that. I mean, it's unbelievable. So the first slice came out pretty dense, and honestly, I could have taken my time and got a thinner slice, but I own a deli slicer, so I wanted to take advantage of that, and so I'm just gonna pull out the deli slicer. But wow, this first slice, you're gonna start to see just how incredible this comes out. So we're just gonna be heating a pan up onto a medium heat-ish with some olive oil. We're gonna toss that bacon in, and we're just gonna keep on turning it over back and forth until it looks crisp all the way through. I mean, and look at that. We have achieved bacon. Now, let's just see if it tastes like it. Let's see what Monica has to say.
Ooh, that looks really pretty.
It's wild,
Yeah,
right?
it looks really nice coming right off the
burner too. It's
sizzling
it's
a little
sizzling
bit.
still.
Oh, it
It's
looks really good. I love all the colors and the ridges.
I mean, it's so hot. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, I love this crispy bacon.
Wild, right?
Yeah, it's crispy. This part is a little bit more chewy, like
little
normal.
soft?
Like it's a little bit more of that fatty. It's got a nice chew and bite to it. The flavor is really nice. Like it tastes like what I would think bacon would taste like, but it's not like too overwhelming. It's like really like, it's like an, I don't know how to say it other than it's like a really nice flavor.
It's so the Daikon bacon has always been the winner.
The Daikon, and I love like the rice paper bacon
I know
too.
you love the rice paper bacon. But as far as a real bacon replacement, where are you gonna rank this?
Yeah, I think this does it. Like this one is the closest.
Yeah.
The other ones are still great. Like they're still very close and they're all good for different times, but this one like wins.
This is the best by far. I'm so happy about it.
Really good.
My God. That's what we got. The last bacon video for a long time.
Next year, a few months.
Next year we might have some bacon if we learn anything new, but this is the last one.